All right, welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Questions came in last week. Whatever questions come up before, but always good questions should be repeated, depending on what they are. The question by Noahide, and this can apply to a Jew in training, or seemingly even to a Jew, right? We'll see how this will apply. And the question is, what if the parents are anti-Semites? So easier by a non-Jew, because I would think most Jews today are not anti-Semites. They may be self-hating Jews, right? There are a lot of them out there. Wouldn't necessarily call them, wouldn't necessarily they're anti-Semites. But the question was, to a non-Jew, do you have to respect? Do you have to respect parents that are anti-Semites? And not only that, if you're living by them, you have an obligation to leave, right? You have an obligation to move on. So really, the question revolves around the fact that, is there an obligation in general for Jews and non-Jews? We'll see. Is there an obligation to respect parents that are evil? And depends what level, of them being evil, right? But there's a difference of opinion between the Torah and the Rambam. That the Torah is the son of the Rosh, and the Rambam disagree. Right? According to one, even though the parent is evil, still have to have respect. In other words, you can't make fun of them, can't disgrace them. Doesn't necessarily mean I have to honor them. Right? That's the whole question. Right? At least once a day, the parents would walk in the room, you'd have an obligation to stand up. Certainly for a Jew. There would be an obligation for a child to stand up for their parent. What if the parent is evil? Now, if the parent is evil, according to the definition of the Torah, so if a parent is evil, it could be I have no obligation. I have no obligation whatsoever. No obligation in honor. Maybe I don't have any obligation in respect. Right? Honor for sure. Everyone would agree. I shouldn't say everyone would agree. Right? This is be a difference of opinion if I have to honor them. You're going to say, but if they're evil, why do I have to honor them? Honoring means you'd have to stand up for them when they walk in a room. Right? You still can't contradict them. You still can't make fun of them. You still can't embarrass them. Now, that's one side. The other side is, if someone is evil according to the definition of the Torah, then I don't have an obligation to honor them. I have zero obligation. Why would I have an obligation to honor them? But the question is, am I allowed to disrespect them? Right? Am I allowed to contradict them? Which, in general, we wouldn't be allowed to do. The only thing we'd be allowed to do is to say that, well, if they say something that goes against Torah. Right? That's the question. What are my obligations? Now, if they're evil, one opinion is I don't really have so many obligations. I certainly don't have to honor them. Right? But I have to show them respect. At the very least, I have to show them respect. Now, as I was going to mention before, if they say something that goes against what God says, goes against the Torah, you're not allowed to say you're wrong. Certainly not allowed to call them names. You're allowed to say, well, I think the Torah says like this. I think the prophet says like this. So they're going to understand by osmosis the fact that you're disagreeing and that the Torah disagrees. So you're going to say, how are you allowed to do that? Because that's respectful. You're not allowed to say you're wrong. That's disrespectful. Even if they are wrong. Even if they are making, let's say they're making fun of Torah or whatever. You still have to be respectful. Now, the other opinion will say, you do have an obligation to honor them. Right? They walk in the room because of your parents. You still have an obligation to honor them. Certainly to respect them. So they would both agree. Both opinions over here would say that my obligation is that I'm not allowed to disparage them, not allowed to make fun of them. And it doesn't matter what they say. And it really doesn't matter what they've done. Now, this sounds a little bit, as English would say, a little bit dodgy. Because what if they've done egregious things? Physical abuse, mental abuse. So it doesn't mean you have to be a punching bag over here. But at the same time, you still have to show respect. The story in the Talmud, one of the rabbis, his mother, took his purse, took his bag, threw it in the river. Whatever's in the bag, gone. So you see, that's not an easy thing over here. Honoring parents, one of the hardest mitzvahs to do. So the obvious question would be, if a parent was really bad, again, whether physical abuse, mental abuse, no one says they have a free pass. They don't get a free pass. They will be punished. God will take care of them. For the fact that they brought you into the world obligates a certain level of respect. Now, does that mean, if they're really bad, I don't have a mitzvah to guard myself against them? Doesn't mean that. I'm allowed to guard myself against it. And if they're physically abusive, you can defend yourself. You're allowed to defend yourself. Still, it makes it a little bit hard over here. If they, even if they do terrible things, why can't I call them out? Why can't I contradict them? Why can't I say other things against them if they really deserve it? Because don't forget, there are laws of Lashon Hara. Right? The laws of Lashon Hara still apply. Now, even if you tell me, technically speaking, by a non-Jew or by a secular Jew, maybe I'm allowed to say whatever I want. Rabbi Chaim says maybe these laws don't apply to them based on a technicality, but maybe they don't apply. But the Rabbi Chaim there says, even if it wouldn't apply, you're still not allowed. Unless it meets certain criteria. Unless it meets certain conditions. Not allowed to just say what I want. But I have to be a little more sensitive over here. Even if they were mentally abusive, even if they're physically abusive. It doesn't give me the right to blaspheme against them. Because after all, they brought you in the world. They brought you into the world. Now they could say it was a mistake. I didn't want you. They could say all kinds of terrible things. You don't really deserve to be in this world. They can say cruel things. And guess what? You know what the Torah wants from us? The Torah wants you to keep your mouth shut. And you're not allowed to answer. What? I have to sit there and take the abuse? Okay, there's a limit. Not saying the person has to have all kinds of contact, and that's what's going to happen. So you minimize contact, right? We've spoken about this a number of times. You minimize contact with family, parents, siblings, if it's toxic. But even so, what does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me one of the 10 commandments, you got to respect your parents. You got to honor them. But for goodness sakes, they did this, the other thing. They did all these things wrong. They abused me. Psychologically, physically. Right? They did terrible things. So we're not disagreeing. They don't have a free pass. God will take care of them. But the question is, what's my obligation? What's my obligation to them? The Talmud says there are three people involved over here when a person's conceived. You got a mother, a father, or two people together, whatever it is, or a petri dish, whatever. We'll keep this clean. And you got God. You got God who puts it in the soul. So essentially, without them, you wouldn't be here. Now you say, okay, maybe my soul would come back through other parents. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not the issue. The issue is we don't have a choice. We're not given a choice who our parents are. We're not given a choice who our siblings are. We're not given a choice about anything. Right? So whatever reason, we have to go through this. So it's your economic situation. We have no choice. Right? We have no choice over here. You live against your will, you die against your will. The Mishnah Pirkei Avos says. Right? It says in ethics for our fathers, but you still have to live. Right? Put that in parentheses. You still have to live. Now, this is a very hard thing. Right? Honoring parents, one of the hardest mitzvahs to do. Next to almost impossible. Right? That's not me saying, this is what the Talmud says. Very, very hard mitzvah to do. And in general, I would say parents deserve honor. They deserve respect. I don't think there's any question. But if they do certain things, right, we see there's a difference of opinion, how far that goes. Just because they brought you in the world doesn't mean they can do whatever they want. And a person can say, well, I became who I am despite my parents, as someone told me. I understand what they meant. Parents might not have been the greatest parents in the world. Okay. Doesn't mean you did everything yourself. You brought yourself up. You took yourself out of the womb. That's a little bit much. Right? That's not true. You were taken care of. Maybe not in the best way, but you're still taken care of. So there's a certain level of respect everybody has to have. A certain level. Even if it's hard. Even if they spit in your face. Even if they say terrible things. That's how far it goes. So a person's going to say, someone called me out a few weeks ago, and said, but isn't the Torah too hard? Doesn't the Torah make it so hard? Torah is what it is. God's not saying, I'm giving all these mitzvahs only to the righteous. Right? The example we've given before. You want to borrow someone's lawnmower, and they say, nope, not letting it to you. Their lawnmower breaks. They come to you 2 weeks later. You have a lawnmower, say, can I borrow it? And if you say no, because you didn't let me borrow mine, yours, sorry, I'm not letting you borrow mine. That's a Torah prohibition. That's a Torah prohibition taking revenge. That you're not allowed to do. That is forbidden. We're going to say, does the Torah really expect me to live up to that ideal? The Torah is not talking only to the righteous. In duties of the heart, the Chos of Avos says clear a number of times. You think this applies to everyone who's righteous. It doesn't apply to everybody. Not true. Totally not true. But someone will say, but look what they did. Look how bad I was treated. Not going to disagree. Right? If it's true, call a spade a spade. You're right. But the Torah expects more. The Torah doesn't tell me I have to sit there and be part of a toxic relationship. I don't have to do that. I don't have to be around them. I don't have to speak to them. Or I can speak to them once in a blue moon. Right? If that. Right? But the Torah doesn't tell me I have to be a glutton for punishment. At the same time, there's a catch-22, which we always say. And the catch-22 is that even if that's the case, even if I don't necessarily have to honor them, I still have to have a certain level of respect. For the only reason that they brought you into this world. Now, that might be a hard thing, depending on what we've gone through. Right? No question. No question. Someone asks, okay, let's see how far this goes. What's expected of a child that the mother locked her and the father in a room, tried to kill them? Right? Okay, it's a little bit extreme, but, if they're mentally messed up, which definitely seems like that's the case in this case, doesn't matter what the child did, right? It's irrelevant what the child did. So a person like that, a parent like that, yeah, they're called evil, right? That there's no question. Now, does that mean the child has to have a regular relationship, call them on a regular basis? I wouldn't say that. They have to have any relationship with them? I wouldn't say that. It's their choice if they want to, but no one says they're obligated, right? But at the same time, does that child have the right, except in therapy? Except in therapy, do they have the right just to say whatever they want against the parent? The laws of Lashon Hara still apply, right? So you tell me, how can that apply over here? Look what the person did. I agree, right? People like that shouldn't have children. There are some parents out there should never have children. But be that as it may. Some people, maybe they're bipolar. Maybe they had other issues. I'm not saying what they did is right by any stretch. There's no question. So the child, regarding that parent, has a few choices. One choice is they don't have anything to do with them ever. That's a choice. Who says they have to be in contact with them? At the same time, does not give them the right to say whatever they want. Now, technically, I would say, speaking Lashon Hara against them shouldn't be an issue. Cursing them out to other people shouldn't be an issue. Maybe even to their face. Maybe it shouldn't be an issue. Technically speaking. Right? But the halacha is, I have to show a certain level of respect. Doesn't matter what they've done. Doesn't matter how horrendous what they've done. Torah's telling you, you still have to be bigger. You still have to show, a certain level of respect. Doesn't mean I have to honor them. Right? According to that opinion, honor goes out the window. I don't have to honor them. But what about contradicting them? What about cursing them out? What about speaking Lashon Hara against them? So I'd say maybe technically it should be okay. Person vents, makes them feel better. Whatever. Maybe that should be okay. If a person's going through therapy, 100% it's okay. The person is allowed to say what they've gone through. They also have to make sure what they're telling them, they're not exaggerating. They're not ad-libbing over here. They're saying exactly what happened. Over here it has a purpose. Sure, it certainly has a purpose for the person to heal. So that would be permissible. 100% be permissible. The question is, right, the only question we're asking here is outside of therapy. Outside of a person who's going through therapy, are they allowed to say whatever they want against the parents? Are they allowed to blaspheme against them, call them out, disrespect them? So according to one opinion, the answer is certainly not. Certainly not. Not in any way. The other opinion would say, you don't have an obligation. Right? Technically, you can say whatever you want. The problem is, there are still other laws over here. Laws of Lashon Hara. Laws of Nivel Peh. Cursing. As well. This does not mean, let's just make clear. This does not mean the parents are off the hook. They're not off the hook. If someone did that, yeah, God is certainly going to take care of them. That there's no question. They are not off the hook at all. The only question is, what's my obligation to them? Now, physical abuse is pretty bad. Mental abuse also bad. Not going to compare them. But what about mental abuse? What if they say cruel things? And they've said cruel things, for a long time. And you basically have zero relationship with them, because of it. So a person has a choice. People will throw out there and they'll say, but you have an obligation to me because I'm your parent. Now, that's partially true. They'll say, maybe they'll say, isn't it one of the 10 commandments? They want you to desecrate Shabbos. Guess what? Honoring parents gets superseded over here. Because if a parent says, I want you to desecrate Shabbos, and there's an obligation to listen to parents in general, unless other things happen, then that obligation goes out the window because you're not allowed to desecrate Shabbos. Right? You say, I am obligated to respect you. That's true. But I'm also obligated to keep what God says. I'm obligated to keep his law. So that supersedes, one of the other 10 commandments to honor parents. That supersedes it. Keeping Shabbos is also one of the 10 commandments. But one doesn't necessarily offset the other. Right? A parent says, you got to do this, you got to listen to me. You're obligated not to. Even if you're a child. Right? Even if you're a child. Unless they absolutely force you. Then it's not your sin anymore. But if they force you to desecrate Shabbos, it's not your sin. They're forcing you. Right? You're under a tremendous amount of pressure. Right? And someone asked me a number of times, this question. They weren't able to stand up to the parents. They're still living in the house. Right? 18, 19, whatever it was. Parents very, very strong. And they felt they had to desecrate Shabbos because the parents forced them. They said, I'll never get out of this certain level of hell, blah, blah, blah. Desecrate Shabbos on purpose. He understands what Shabbos is. Right? He's becoming religious. Understands what Shabbos is to a certain extent. But he's under onus. There's an onus over here. He's being forced. Tremendous amount of peer pressure. That's the only reason why he's doing it. But he understands what he's doing. You're right. He understands what he's doing, but it doesn't make him into a person who's doing it by, doing it on purpose. So I asked this question to the Anti-Semitic Torah, Yitzhak Berkowitz, Shlita, should be well. I asked him this question. And asked Rav Sternberg because I know what he's going to tell me. I know exactly what he's going to say. But I happen to see Rav Berkowitz, tremendous rabbinic authority, of his own. So I asked him this question. So he answered me very simple. He said, you know how hard it is to make someone transgress something on purpose today? Someone who's really doing something on purpose is, you know how hard that is to do that? So what does that mean? That means even if someone desecrates Shabbos on purpose, and there's a certain level of hell maybe they'll never get out of because tshuva doesn't help, according to Kabbalah, without going into it. Even if we say that is true, the person's not doing it on purpose. Why isn't he doing it on purpose? Because he's being forced. Tremendous amount of peer pressure. That's a major fact. That's not a factor you just push under the carpet. And he's saying, it's doing it on purpose. See, he's going to fry. How's that help him? How's that help the person? It doesn't. Now, isn't it true? If someone desecrates Shabbos, a certain level of hell they don't get out of, if they do it on purpose, tshuva won't help. Yeah, who's living according to Kabbalah? Not too many people. I had someone ask me a question once. Has something to do with Kabbalah, and I said, you holding by Kabbalah? I said, if you're holding by Kabbalah, call me. That was my answer. A little bit gruff. I want people to get the message. I want people to understand. If you can barely read the Aleph page, you're not holding by Kabbalah. Right? If you don't walk till you learn how to crawl. You don't learn calculus unless you've learned algebra or trig. Right? If you're only doing the times table, what are you learning calculus for? Doesn't mix. So if someone's done something, I just want to point this out. If someone has done something because of peer pressure as a Jew and they desecrated Shabbos, they're under onus. It doesn't matter how much they understand the laws of Shabbos. They're under onus. They're being forced. They're not doing it because of their own will. How can that be called on purpose? Doesn't make sense that they should be called on purpose over here. So you tell me, but they can't stand up to the parents. Okay, mental pressure is a huge thing. And if you're a child still living in the parents' house, doesn't matter if you're a teenager, however old you are, right? And there's tremendous parental pressure. And you can't stand up to the pressure. That doesn't mean you're doing it on purpose. That's not what it means. Peer pressure is a real thing. Right? So back to the original question. The child in this case, does not have to have a great relationship with the parents. Right? If that's what they did to them. If they abused them. Do they have to ever speak to them again? No. They have to have any contact whatsoever? No. Torah doesn't obligate you in that case. But even if you tell me, the obligation to respect them, who says I have to have a relationship with them? If it's toxic, there's no obligation whatsoever. But even so, if you would come in contact with that parent, you still have to show a certain amount of respect. And that's going to be hard. That's going to be a very hard thing to do. Right? Can't curse them. Can't embarrass them. You have to be careful what you say. All these other laws apply. Lashon hara applies. Cursing applies. Embarrassing them in public applies. These things apply. So I would tell someone in that situation, you don't have, you basically have zero obligation over here. What obligations do you have? You don't have any obligation. Right? You certainly don't have to have contact. But I'm saying if there would be contact, I'm not saying you have to stand up for them if you see them walk in a room. You don't have to have that level of honor. But cursing them out, speaking lashon hara against them, embarrassing them, still not allowed to do that. Now again, technically I would say probably there's nothing wrong with it. Not in the laws of lashon hara, and maybe these other things. Probably not an issue, technically speaking. Nonetheless, it shouldn't be done. It's not a good thing to do. Right? I would say it's a moral imperative. Doesn't make, it might make you feel better. You blew off some steam. You told them off. Might make you feel a lot better. Doesn't mean it's a good thing. Right? Just because it might not necessarily be forbidden based on a technicality does not mean I should be doing it. Right? There are many things by the Noahide laws. Right? Watch my video on YouTube. Right? About that on Tanakh Talk. Spoke about it. And that is, that there are a lot of things that a non-Jew may not be obligated in because of the Noahide laws, but because of the moral imperative. It's not a good thing for them to do. Speaking lashon hara does not apply to non-Jews. Right? One example. Doesn't apply to them. And not something's logical. A lot of the laws are not necessarily logical according to the Torah. But even so, you'd have to ask the question, if I speak about this person or I speak about others and everyone does it anyway, is that a good thing for me or not? Right? So you have to ask yourself, is that helping me draw closer to God or not? So the answer will be no. That would be my answer. It's not helping you draw closer to God. I'm not saying it's forbidden. You want to speak lashon hara about someone? Go ahead. Right? There's no issue by a non-Jew. Really no issue. The question is it something I should do? Right? Is it something the non-Jew should do? Does that make them closer to God? I don't think so. So it should be. So they shouldn't do it. But you're not going to fry in hell forever. You're not going to get killed over here because of one of the Noahide laws. Let's not make that mistake. It's not a Noahide law. It's a moral imperative. There are a lot of things like that are moral imperative. So, that's what I would say. Someone asks, I know it's going to be a hot topic here. Someone asks, is the lashon hara if you listen to one parent vent to you about the other parent? Yeah, if they're speaking lashon hara, one against the other. If they're speaking one against the other, you're not allowed to believe what they say. Now, if it's something that could cause you damage, potentially, you're allowed to guard yourself against it, but you're not allowed to believe it 100%. Now, what's the reason you're not allowed to believe it 100%? Because that's the problem with Lashon Hara. When someone speaks Lashon Hara and you happen to hear it, and if they exaggerate, if it's the truth, it doesn't matter. Whatever they're saying is forbidden. If it's forbidden and you listen to it and you believe it, you also transgress. But you didn't say it. You're right. Doesn't matter if you said it or not. You are guilty of accepting Lashon Hara. But if you have a doubt in your mind, you don't accept it 100% what they say, right? So then that's okay. It has to be a doubt in your mind. If you accept it, Lashon Hara is also if someone says something truthful. Doesn't mean they just lie. So let's say one parent says something against the other, and what they're saying is true. What they're saying 100% is true. Still Lashon Hara. And if you believe it, it's still Lashon Hara. You believe Lashon Hara over here. So you say, but if it's true, how do I get it out of my head that it's not true? So that's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. What I'm saying is you have to put in your mind and say and have it as a doubt. It has to be a doubt in your mind. If you accept it hook, line, and sinker, then you've accepted Lashon Hara. That's forbidden. That 100% is forbidden. That's why we say anyone who speaks Lashon Hara, they kill 3 people. They kill themselves. I mean, not literally, but they kill themselves because they said it. They kill the person who they said it against, and they kill the person who heard it. Because the person who heard it also transgresses. You tell me he didn't say it. You're right, he didn't say it. But if he believed it, then he also transgressed. Right? There are 36 prohibitions. Right? Or that's by gear. More than 30 prohibitions by speaking Lashon Hara. Right? Hearing Lashon Hara, yeah, it's a big problem. Because it happens all the time. We hear things, doesn't matter who it's said by. We hear things, we believe it. Now you tell me, well, what if a non-Jew says it? He's not liable for Lashon Hara. True. Doesn't mean it's not Lashon Hara, though. He may not be liable, but he's saying something bad against someone else. It qualifies as Lashon Hara. And if you hear it, you believe it, unless it's something you're obligated to guard yourself against. So I just learned something today. Very interesting. Reuven's talking to Shimon. And Reuven says to Shimon, I'm going to go and I'm going to pounce on Levi. Levi did whatever. He said, I'm going to come and I'm going to beat him to a pulp. I'm going to take 2 friends of mine. We're going to beat him to a pulp. Now, the Rabbi Chaim says over there that you're allowed to warn Levi under one condition. What's the condition? First, you have to try and calm Reuven down. You have to give him rebuke. You have to give him rebuke over here. Even if he's not going to listen, you have to give him rebuke. If you don't give him rebuke, well, first of all, you have to see if what he's saying is serious. If this is something Reuven does on a regular basis, right? You have to evaluate the situation. And if you say, okay, this is what he could really do, because he's done it in the past, then you have an obligation to try and calm him down. Trying to give him rebuke over here. And if he doesn't listen, then you're allowed to warn Levi. But you'd say, why aren't I allowed to warn Levi straight away? Because there are laws of Lashon Hara. First of all, you don't know this person's really going to do it. Right? You don't know what he's going to do. And there are people that talk a big game, they don't do anything. They just talk. So if that's the case, the person that does that on a regular basis, you don't have to warn him. You don't have to warn Levi over here. You still should give him rebuke. Even if he's not going to listen, still give him rebuke. But you're not allowed to tell Levi straight away. The Rabbi Chaim says you got to understand the situation. You got to see where the guy's holding. You got to see if he does it on a regular basis. Then you have to give him rebuke. And then once you give him rebuke, then you can, and he's not going to listen, then you go to Levi. But who says I'm allowed to do it straight away? That's what I might think. But it's not true. Rabbi Chaim says that clear. Not true. So a person hears someone saying Lashon Hara. It could be a parent against a parent. Other people, allowed to believe it. You're allowed to have a doubt about it. You're allowed to leave it as a doubt. You're not allowed to believe it. That's forbidden. That's accepting Lashon Hara. It's a funny thing, actually. Right? Here you got, a non-Jew speaking about another non-Jew. Right? Speaking badly against another non-Jew. There's no Lashon Hara. They don't transgress anything about Lashon Hara. Maybe it's not a good thing to do, but they don't transgress. But for you, it's Lashon Hara. You're a Jew. It's Lashon Hara. Across the board, it's Lashon Hara. They're just not liable for it, so you can't believe it. You're not allowed to believe it 100%. But what if you know 100% it's true? Then you're in trouble. Then you have to repent over here. You have to get repentance over here because you accepted Lashon Hara. You accept it as being true. You didn't leave it in doubt. If you didn't leave it in doubt, you accepted it. Right? It's a problem. Right? It's gonna be forbidden. Right? Just ironic. If you have two non-Jews, the laws of Lashon Hara don't apply. Right? Really don't apply to them. To use a non-Jew wouldn't really apply either. Right? Because again, it's not forbidden here. Right? The laws of Lashon Hara don't apply. But if you're a Jew and you hear your non-Jewish parents talking one against the other, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Even if we say they're not liable for Lashon Hara, you are. That's interesting. Just an interesting catch-22. Like, when's a pickle not a pickle? When it's a cucumber, and it's not pickle, right? So when is Lashon Hara not Lashon Hara? Well, two non-Jews speaking Lashon Hara, it's not Lashon Hara. But if you listen to it as a Jew, then it'd be a problem. Right? Interesting thing. Someone asked, if your mother gave away all 4 children as babies, what's the Torah definition of a parent? Still your mother. Still your birth mother. Right? There's no question. So a parent, we're going to take a literal definition here. Right? We're gonna take a biological definition. A parent, a woman is the one, their mother is the one who gave birth to. Now, a stepmother, let's say, you still have an obligation to respect, right? If it's your father's wife, all things being equal, still have an obligation to respect. Not the same as a mother, but still have an obligation because it's your father's wife, right? But she gave up her kids for adoption. Let's say she gave away her kids. She's still the parent, right? She's considered the mother. But the mother had other issues. She's not able to raise her kids, right? And, she's raised, right? This person is raised, by someone else. That person's really not your mother. I mean, they are considered, quote unquote, like your mother, right? She's not your biological mother. But in all intents and purposes, if that person has the status of your mother, so a lot of the laws of honoring parents would apply to them as well. All right, that's what I would say. You can't disparage them, can't make fun of them, can't contradict them. Now, would you have an obligation if they walked in the room to stand up? They're not your mother, right? They're not your mother. At the same time, sign respect, probably should. That you probably should, unless they're evil. Let's say. In-laws also, or outlaws sometimes they're called, right? Also, there's an obligation. Let's say if someone want to respect them, you're honoring them because the wife has an obligation to honor them, to respect them. Now, if they've given you a hard time, they've done all kinds of things. So again, we have that disagreement between the Rambam and the Torah. It's less of an obligation, but it doesn't mean it's not an obligation. Right? Because it's not your, it's not your direct blood. Right? It's not your mother and father, okay? In-laws are your spouse's parents. So there's still a certain level of respect you have to have. For them. So anyone who raised somebody that wasn't the mother, whether it's a stepmother or somebody else, they deserve a certain level of respect. Right? It's not going to be the same as a mother, no question. Right? But there are things you won't do. You wouldn't do for a stepmother, you wouldn't do for a, for your mother as well. Even though it's not exactly the same. Right? Even if I would say it's not the same, doesn't matter. So the abuse always stem from a mental issue. That's a good question. That is a good question. They say by I'll try and keep this clean. They say by pedophilia. Pedophilia, they say that only happens because they themselves were abused. Right? So they abuse others in the same way they were abused. That I think a very, very high percentage. I think across the board, actually. If someone is a pedophile, they've been abused themselves. Right? Usually they've been abused themselves. It goes hand in hand. Does abuse always stem from a mental issue? Depends. Physical abuse, in general, could just be bad education. They got that from the parents. Someone told me recently, such a case that, a guy's afraid of his father when he was growing up, did something wrong. His father, took out a belt and whacked him, and smacked him. So he's got a fear element. Now, that type of discipline, everybody agrees today. I don't think there's any question. Dr. Spock included. Everybody would agree. That type of confrontation does not work. I don't know previous generations that worked either. Right? But, that's what people did. First, if a kid was really out of line, you smacked him. That's what people did. I'm not saying, you beat them till they were black and blue. Right? But you hit them. You put them in line. Depends what they've done. It has to be something pretty egregious. To sit there and hit a kid for no reason, for something because they just annoy you, right? That's forbidden. But everybody agrees today that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Not only doesn't it work, they'll probably call the police on you. They'll probably call the police and say it's child abuse. That's this generation. But I'm not convinced way back when it worked either. Maybe it was a deterrent. You get a smack. You did certain things, right? Regardless how egregious it was or not, but that according to everyone today does not work. Now, I think part of the issue is, in general, that how would a parent today know how to be a parent? Know how to discipline their kids? Right? One of the most, best-selling books today on the market, a lot of them are self-help books. All kinds of things. One of them being parenting. Now, why would you need books about parenting? You would think, or I would think, let's say better, that the best example of how to parent would be how your parents parented. Now, if a person's parents weren't the greatest of parents, forget about abuse. I'm not even going to go to abuse yet. Well, they weren't the greatest of parents. Right? How many parents today in the secular world, right? I'd love to take a survey. How many parents today ever took a parenting class or read a parenting book? I don't think the number is very high at all. Even in my parents' generation, 80 years ago, did they read any books about parenting? No. Forget books about parenting. Before Dr. Spock, right? Did they ever take any classes on parenting? No. Not at all. So the joke is, but it's not really a joke. When should a person start learning what it means to be a parent? 20 years before you have kids. They're going to say, but you're a kid. How can you know about being a parent if you're a kid? Okay, it's a good question. Right? Valid question. But see, a kid is going to get a lot of their information. Most of their information doesn't come from school. And it doesn't even come from their peers. It comes from the house. Now, a kid could go sour, could go what we say OTD, off the derech, so to speak. It has nothing to do with the parents. They're just caught up in the secular world with secular things. They just want to, get out. They just want to do what they want to do. They want to be free, so to speak. They have nothing to do with philosophical questions. They don't want this lifestyle. Right? Now, it can happen in the best of families, it can happen in the worst of families. Right? It's across the board. This happens. There's a phenomenon going on today. But even with that, Rav Simcha Wasserman, a blessed memory, son of Rabbi Chaim, Shem Yikam Damoy, God should avenge his blood. So Rabbi Akiva Tatz, very close to him, they were related, I think it was a cousin. Rabbi Akiva Tatz asked Rav Simcha Wasserman, how did you become such an expert in parenting? Now, behind the question, and he asked it also explicitly, he never had children. Rav Simcha Wasserman did not merit to have children. He had a lot of students. He never had children. So Rav Simcha answered him very simple. How do I know anything about parenting? Because I saw what my parents did. I saw clear what my parents did. So the parents, for better or for worse, they're the ones that have the most influence. No question. They have the most influence on the child. Now, a child can see a parent on the best day or on the worst day. Or on many bad days, let's say. And a child can act out different things because they're not getting what they need. Now, if the child's not getting what they need, but the parent thinks they're giving what they need, then what you do is you have to give more to what the child needs. Because they're feeling they're not getting what they need. So you have to go well beyond to show that it's not true. And you have to give them what they need. I mean, within reason. But parents today, and again, we're not giving them a clear slate here. We're not giving them a free pass. There are parents out there, and I will make the claim because we are recording this. I will make the claim there are parents out there should never have children, ever. Should have been neutered. Because they did a horrific job. I'm not saying everybody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. But there are people out there who should never have kids. For a number of different reasons. Now, I think a good part of the issue is they were never taught how to deal with emotion. They're an emotional issue. Learn how to deal with anger. And a person has kids, listen, a lot of things going on. Could be financially struggling, working long hours. Kids act up here and there, you explode. Can't do that. Can't punish out of anger. I mean, there are a lot of general rules here, about parenting. I think today there are a lot of things that gone awry by parents because they don't have any clue whatsoever what they're doing. And there are a lot of good parenting books out there, in the Torah world, no question. But the question is, why do you need them? That's my question. Why do you need them? Because it's an art that's been lost. If you learned it from your parents, then a person will have a healthy relationship with their kids. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect. But all things being equal, if there's love between the parents, there's harmony between the parents, marital harmony, then the kid should be okay. Doesn't mean life is perfect. A person could have anger issues, could have other ego issues, many things, right? So the question here is, does abuse always stem from a mental issue? It depends what type of abuse it is. There are people that, as much as they don't like their parents, let's say it better. If they don't like their parents, they say, I'll never do what my parents did. I'll go far away from what my parents did. What sometimes happens, you fall in the same pattern. Why? Creature of habit. This is what you saw your parents do. That's what you do. But what if you were never taught? What if your parents were extremely unemotional? How's that person supposed to feel emotion? That like nothing ever bothers anyone until they explode. They don't know how to show emotion. So is that a mental issue? It's an issue dealing with emotions. A lot of people have issues dealing with emotions. Some better, some not. It's not saying, a person necessarily needs therapy. They may need therapy. But what if they were never taught proper emotions? They didn't see a healthy marriage between parents. How are they themselves going to have a healthy marriage? So when a person gets married, before they get married, they go through classes in the Orthodox world. A guy goes through classes, a woman goes through classes. Not, they go through classes. Now, is that a guarantee? It's not a guarantee. It takes work, it takes effort. But for goodness sakes, if you don't have a clue how the world works, and you're just going, according to what you think, 9 times out of 10, you'll make mistakes. You absolutely make mistakes. So where are you supposed to get direction from? So we know where to get direction from. Our direction comes from Torah. Our direction comes from the rabbis. Right? It comes from great people to educate us what we're supposed to do. So, mental abuse could come from the fact that a parent's insecure, parents got ego problems, parents got, let's say, anger issues. Who doesn't have anger issues? Some better, some worse. Right? There are many different reasons why. Now, the question is, what happens by physical abuse? Physical abuse, there's something else going on. No, it's not just a mental issue. It's beyond the mental issue. Right? If you're talking about, incest or something like that, yeah, there's something seriously wrong. There's definitely something seriously wrong. Physical abuse, people could go through it without even understanding what they're doing. So yeah, it is a form of mental issue. They block it out. They just it could be, some people get so angry, and it doesn't have to be about that much. They could just, they've had a hard day, a long day, they're overtired, and a kid, wants something and screams and this and has a tantrum and you lose it. It can happen. It can happen. The problem is how you react to it. So I would say, again, without certainly being an expert, no question, I would say that that's anger gone haywire. And if you would ask anybody in general, if a child acts up, do you have a right to pummel them? Do you have a right to, lock them in the basement for 2 days? No food or water or anything. I would think most people with half a brain would say no. Some people may justify it. Depends what they've done. Depends on this. No. There's no justification. Now, some people may be misguided, 100% misguided. But I think a good amount, has to do with the fact that most people don't know what it means to be a parent and how to be a proper parent because they've never been educated in that. And there may be other issues going on as well. Again, a person could have some mental issues. But it can also be, doesn't necessarily have to be a mental issue. That's how they react. When they're under stress and things happen, they pummel people. That's what they do. Then this anger goes crazy. Now you're gonna say, is it only an anger issue that they abuse people? No, it's not only that. I'm saying it's part of it. It's definitely part of it. Sexual abuse, yeah, that's a major issue. That's a major issue. Yeah, they're, that most likely that person themselves has been abused. Usually, not saying across the board, but that's usually the case. Physical abuse doesn't necessarily mean there's a mental disorder. It just means they don't know how to deal with anger. They don't know how to deal with stress. And when something happens and they're a stress ball or whatever, and then their kid does something, they just lose it. They absolutely lose it. Now, I would say in general, is that part of mental illness? And most people know you shouldn't hit your kids. You shouldn't pummel them. You shouldn't lock them in a closet, set them on fire. I mean, obviously these things are beyond. It's well beyond. Right? But I don't think people, are aware of how far this goes. Yeah, anger is a bad character trait. Can destroy kids. Totally destroy them. Because if it's not controlled, and the parent just, anytime the child does something they don't like, they just slaughter them, scream at them, the child's going to have serious issues later, unless they deal with them. They'll think that's the way you deal with things. That's how you deal with things. So it could be from insecurity. I mean, it could be for any number of things. Right? I don't necessarily think 100% of the time it's going to be a mental issue. I could be wrong. But I don't think people hit their kids. I mean, like pummel them when they're angry. I don't think it's a mental issue. I don't think they think there's anything wrong with it. Kid did this. He deserves to be pummeled. He won't do it again. Punishment absolutely has to fit the crime. But that doesn't teach anything. They just don't know how to control anger. Now, is not controlling anger, which is a good part of this, is that a mental issue? Does that mean they're mentally challenged? No, it doesn't mean that. It means they're a bad character trait. And being angry is one of the worst. The Talmud says a person gets so angry, if they were standing over the pit of Gehenna, the pit of hell, and about to get fried, they're not going to change. That's how bad it is. You lose yourself. You don't even know what you're doing. Sometimes. Because you get so angry, you can't see anything outside of that. You just go ballistic. You lose it. Now, you could tell me that's a mental illness. Depends how you're going to define it. Right? I think a lot of people have mental illness in the sense of parenting. We could define as mental illness because they don't know what they're doing. Never taken a parenting class in their lives. They don't understand what it really means to be a parent. In general. Doesn't mean they're perfect. Doesn't mean even if you took all the parenting class in the world that you do everything you're supposed to do. Doesn't mean that. 100% doesn't mean that. But at least you have self-control. Because if you don't have self-control, you will destroy kids. You'll destroy your kids. And they'll need serious therapy to get over that. You'll kill them. Now, fortunately, been a lot of parents out there kill their kids. Because, either they weren't emotional, maybe too involved. I mean, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things. Talking yesterday, I was up north. We had a whole discussion, a little bit of discussion about parenting. At the end, and I was telling the story. First time I sat on my Rebbe's base, then there was a divorce case, messy divorce case came in. First time I sat there, and the grandparents were there, the parents were there. It was like a whole mess, yelling and screaming, this and that, all religious people. So they brought in someone, a mediator, that was dealing with this. And they told everyone to stand outside. The mediator came in. So they asked the mediator, is there anything to do to help this case? So the mediator said, of course. I could have helped this case a long time ago. I'm trying to help this case. There's only one problem. The problem is the parents are interfering way too much. Because they're interfering way too much, I can't do anything. One side's being poisoned against the other because there's too much interference. Okay. So that's an extreme case. Getting involved in a kid's marriage is a big no-no. Big no-no. Right? I remember people marrying off their kids many years ago. And they told me a fundamental principle. That is, you always have to have your pocket open, i.e., give money when the kids need it. If you have it, you have to learn to keep your mouth shut. So I said, I get 2 strikes against me. I don't have money in my pocket, and I got a big mouth. But in the end, if you interfere, you pay a price. You ruin your kid's marriage. You ruin your relationship with them. Yeah, I told all my son-in-laws, my 3 son-in-laws, before they walked down the aisle, before my daughters walked down the aisle, I said, once you're under the chuppah, you're under that canopy, she's all yours. These girls are all yours. I said, I'm out of the picture. If there's trouble, there are issues, this, that. I said, but I'm not getting involved. I will not get involved. That's the right attitude. I don't know if I should say it before every wedding, right? But that has to be the rule of thumb. Even, sometimes it's painful to see what people do, but that's what being a parent is. Sometimes you have to watch, even if they're not going to listen. But if a person's over involved, also ruins his marriage. That's the olive base. It's really the olive base. So parenting is not a foolproof science here. We're working with a very weak generation today. And things that worked years ago don't necessarily work today. But parents have to be like the rock at your boat. No matter what your kids bring home, you got to be strong, but it's hard. And parenting today, again, every generation has their different things. They have their different, nisyonos, different trials, different things that different difficulties. Every generation has it. So the generation no different. Parenting is very hard. It's very, very hard. But still have an obligation to be parents. We still have to do the right thing the majority of the time, and it's not so easy. We're human. Again, who are kids going to look up to the most? It's not their peers, it's not their teachers, it's their parents. And the parents mess that up. The kids get different messages. Kids aren't stupid. So, we have to work hard. No, there's no question. But, part of me will say, physical abuse and whatever, yeah, there is something wrong with the person. There is definitely something wrong. And what could be wrong is just the fact they have anger issues. They don't know how to deal with anger. Sexual abuse, that's a different issue. Right? I'm saying if a person hits their kids or yells and screams and whatever, and there's a pattern there, yeah, it stems from anger issues. If they dealt with anger issues, they could deal with their kids in a better way. Right? That's what I would say. Someone asked, the fact that the child is following Torah regardless of the depravity of the parent, would it bring honor to them if they're dead or alive? Yeah. If the parent teaches the child to go in the ways of the Torah, when the parent dies, they get all those mitzvahs. Right? The child is a continuation of the parent. So if they're going in the right direction, parent gets all the merits. If they're going in the wrong direction, parents are in trouble. Because you didn't educate them properly. Doesn't matter why they went off or whatever. They're a product of you. Right? It's a catch-22. If they're doing the right thing, good. We get all the benefits, alive, or when we're not here, we get that benefit. At the same time, if someone goes sour, not doing the right thing, also, it's a reflection of the parents. Now, again, in this generation, kids who go off can come from the best families, from the best family. So you're going to say, but the reflection of the parents isn't a reflection of the parents at some level. At some level, it is. Parents are going to pay a price at some level. Even if it's not directly the parents' fault. Parents get blamed for a lot of things also. That's not necessarily their fault. But the kids say, you should have done this, should have done that. And you did this, you didn't do that. We're not perfect. We make mistakes also. We have to admit if we made mistakes. And we have to fix those mistakes. Mistakes can be fixable, depending on what's been done. But yeah, you can certainly give merit to them, or you could, God forbid, kill them again and again if you don't do the right thing. Someone, let me see here 1 second. Someone asked, how do you avoid back to Lashon Hara if we're stuck in a room with coworkers? So the problem is you got to try and, let's say a lot of people speaking Lashon Hara. You get a lot of people speaking Lashon Hara by the workplace, right? So, hey, you got to try and change the conversation. If you can't try and change the conversation, just think of something else while someone's speaking. And if you can't do that, then you're not allowed to believe what they say. No, those are the only options. You walk away if possible. You change the subject. If you're stuck in a situation, people are speaking, you have no choice, you're listening, there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to change the subject, you can't believe what's being said. You have to keep saying over and over in your heads. You have to keep saying that it's not true, it's not true, it's not true. I'm not going to believe it, and that's it. But it's hard. You're right. It's a common thing, right? The workplace, one of the worst places for Lashon Hara. True, very, very true. So what's the healing? I don't want to know, how do you heal from this? Torah alone doesn't heal. I know it's not going to be a popular answer. If a person is really steeped in Torah, really, really steeped in Torah, then to a certain extent, maybe it can. A person has the right outlook, they understand things, whatever, but it doesn't always work that way. A person's, been abused physically. So knowing, maybe that's what their soul had to go through. Knowing that the person might be not, out of their right mind, knowing that this is one of the trials they had to go through, whatever it is, even if you understand 100% according to Torah, that's not going to heal a person, right? That's not necessarily going to heal a person. It's going to help them to a certain extent with perspective. But a person can't necessarily expect that through that it's going to will them by having a normal life and never getting depressed and never thinking about these things, right? That therapy is probably going to have to help. What Torah can do, is by understanding, what we're doing here, what our purpose is, and how to do this. I'll tell you an example. Someone said that, parents can say terrible things. They can do terrible things. Right? But if I understand, let's say they're mentally abused and they say all kinds of terrible things, for years, they don't change. They just keep nitpicking this, that. So I heard a great rabbi say, the parent who's saying these things, that they're not close to Torah mitzvahs. So the rabbi also has to be a psychologist. Said people like that, they are 100% insane. They deserve to be in a straitjacket, locked up in a psychiatric ward. Now, according to the Torah, that's true. Because they're not in their right mind. Parents going to sit there and just berate a child and all kinds of things. That person's not in their right mind. They're not in their right mind. But what they say is painful. Forget about physical abuse for a second. What they say is painful. Tremendously painful. Now, every time the parent says that, the person gets all choked up, they get angry. They just get beaten down even more. So what would a person do in that situation? If a person has to have contact with such a person, and they do that on a regular basis, they'll never stop, and you still have contacts, then one way of dealing with it is realizing that this person is 100% insane. This person has an IQ of about 15. That means they're mentally challenged. Now, if somebody were mentally challenged, someone who's retarded, right? We're not going to be politically correct here. They're mentally challenged and they scream at you. They throw things at you. They bang into you. Why in the world would I get upset at that? I mean, I might get annoyed, but why would you get upset and start like yelling at them? They don't know what they're doing. They're not in their right mind. We understand they're not in their right mind. They have a 15 IQ. You know, I have a 30-year-old that has an IQ of a 5-year-old. So I got to sit there and get upset for. You know. So you're going to say, okay, let me try and put that into action. Now, let me ask you the $1 million question. I will ask you like this. The fact that someone now does this, parent now does this. So now you're armed. Now you say, come on. Now you're saying to yourself, this person is a wacko. He's an absolute wacko. She's an absolute wacko. They deserve to be strung up in Sing Sing, right? Tied up, psychiatric ward. That's what they deserve. Right? Let's say that's what they deserve. Now, when the person says that, and now you're thinking that, so you're going to say, let them say whatever they want, sticks and stones. It doesn't really matter because the person's mentally insane. Now, I will ask the $1 million question. The $1 million question is, can someone who's been annoyed, mentally abused, you know, for many years, let's say, over a long period of time, can they all of a sudden flip the switch? Can they all of a sudden say, this person is so insane, let them say whatever they want? Because I'm Teflon now. I'm made of Teflon. It's going to bounce off me. You're going to have to work really hard to do that. Because when you hear what they say and they beat you down, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to scream at them. You want to say, who do you have a right to do that? And you're this and you're that. Forget about that. It's not going to go anywhere. Not going to go anywhere. There's nobody home. You're talking to an infant. You're talking to an infant. It just happens to be in an adult body. They're never going to listen. Now, if a person has the ability to do that, 100% they should do it. You know, they can look the parents straight in the eye. They're not affected. Right? You know, as I was told many years ago, people say things, what do you care? What do you care what people say? But it's painful. You know, it might be painful. But if the person's insane, you know, so let them talk. Who cares? The only reason they're going to talk more is because they know they got under your skin. And they know they got your anger. That's what, you know, that's what they want. So if you don't show them any emotion and they try and do it again, you don't show any emotion. Now, does that mean they're going to give up? Not necessarily. But it's not going to be any more fun. Because here they get under your skin. Here they're making fun of you. Here they're saying all these things. You're not reacting. So if you're going to egg on someone and they're not moving, they're not flinching, you know, deep down they might be boiling. They might be furious, but they're not flinching over here. It's not as fun. Because once they start to break you down and they see they're breaking you down, you know, then they're just going to keep doing it. And they're going to keep egging you on. Right? But I always say, knowing what to do and doing it are two different things. A person can say this mantra 100 times, 1,000 times. But when they hear the parent or somebody say something and whatever, they've heard it 100 times, they, you know, all they want to do is burst out and kill them. That's what they want to do. But you have to show self-restraint, which is hard. But if a person does that and they work hard at that, then it doesn't matter what the parents say. Right? That's going to go by the wayside. Now, again, I would be the first one to say that I think that's great advice. Someone here says it's great advice. It's not easy to do. I want to make clear it's not easy to do. But if we looked at it in that way, whatever people say against us, not going to bother us. Never bother us. But we have feelings. We're sensitive. Maybe we're oversensitive, whatever, but we're sensitive. We don't want to hear it. So we want to just react. We want to say something, put them in their place. But you're talking to a brick wall. You're talking to people who could care less what you have to say. They're not interested in what you have to say. They're just going to keep piling it on. So what are you doing? You're egging them on. So you can say, well, maybe you should never speak to them. Maybe. But I'm saying, if you want to know how to deal with it, that's one way. That's one way. Now, if you read all this stuff in Jewish philosophy, understand it's in the science, it's a test, and it's this, and what my soul has to go through had nothing to do with me. It's really with my soul and all that. It doesn't mean, even knowing all that, that doesn't overcome trauma. Right? It won't overcome trauma. That helps. That helps a lot, but it doesn't help someone get over the hump. Right? What's going to get someone over the hump? Either medication plus or minus with therapy. Right? For certain things. All the Torah in the world is not going to do that. Because the person went through a trauma. Right? If it's physical abuse. Let's say. Right? But let's say in my case, use myself as an example. Right? Close family friend, steals all my money. Right? A lot of things happen. And I was living that mantra, but I had good people behind me. I had rabbis giving me chizuk, giving me strength all the time. Helping me whatever I needed, this, that. Maybe not in dollars and cents, but in other ways. But even knowing the right way, how to think, according to the Torah, did not mean every single day I woke up whistling Dixie. Didn't mean that. Good days and bad days. It's trauma. Trauma does not go away by itself. Trauma does not go away because you want to will it away. Some of it maybe. But either person may need medication for certain things, and certainly may need therapy. Right? Depending on what it is. Torah itself will not do that. Unless a person is so steeped in it and they can see it for what it is and overcome that, it very rarely happens. Not in this generation. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's close. It's close. Is a person going to feel that much better? Let's call a spade a spade. Someone got sexually abused, right? Let's say, right? And let's say they understand about the soul. They understand about reincarnation. They understand about trials and tribulations, and they understand all this. Let's say they understand at a very high level. Does that mean that the trauma is going to disappear and they're never going to relive it and they're never going to go through it and everything's going to be great? I don't think that's the case. I never don't believe that's the case. I think some of it to a certain extent, may go by the wayside, but I think other things are going to have to be dealt with in other ways. I don't think Torah itself is going to do that. Unless a person is so unbelievably strong and whatever, but I just think it comes up again and again and again. They rethink it, they relive it and whatever, and it's hard. It's hard. A trauma in general is hard, especially if we didn't bring it on ourselves. Right now, there could have been a million reasons why I lost all my money. Could be a million reasons. I'm not privy to any of them. Right? Could be who knows why. But you know what? At the end of the day, God said you're not having it. That's it. Take it away. Yeah, but I was left holding the bag in so many different ways. Suffered this way, that way, the other way. Many, many different ways. And I have this thing in my face for 17 years. in other ways. So, I still got plenty of anger over that. That's no question. But yeah, I do understand. God giveth, God taketh away. It's either that or death. I'll take that. It could have been for any number of things. And even understanding that, praying 3 times a day, having great rabbis behind me, did not mean every day was an easy day. Especially if you're struggling financially and you got bills to pay, you have no idea where money's coming from. And your world is turned upside down. That's a trauma. That's a major trauma. Right? I'm not saying I came through it 100% the way I wanted to, per se. Had major effects in other ways. But I had ways to deal with it. It helped to a certain extent, to a major extent. Didn't get me over the hump in other ways, right? But it helped in a major way. But in order to overcome that, you got to learn a lot of Torah. You got to put it, you got to live this, on a daily basis. And trauma does not go away so easily. Whether it's physical, whether it's mental, it doesn't. But the more we, again, if it's mental abuse, the more we live that mantra, then no matter what that person's going to say, you're looking at them now, whether you see them on Zoom or whatever, you see them face to face, you just imagine them in a straitjacket. So let them talk. Who cares? I'm saying if they're alive. And even if they're dead, and you still have the same conversation going over and over in your head. You're nothing, you'll be nothing, you're this, you're that. The person's a 3-year-old. The person's a 3-year-old in the body of an adult. Why in the world am I going to take what they say seriously? Why am I going to believe what they say? What do they know? They don't know anything. They're misfits. It deserves to be locked up in a straitjacket. But if a person's gone through this over and over and over again, it's not going to be easy to do that. Over time, it eases. That I can assure you, it eases. It definitely eases. It doesn't dissipate 100%. It could. It really could. Because if not, and you let it get to you, it destroys you. And people like this, I don't care if they're parents, siblings, whatever. No one has the right to destroy anyone and kill them in this world. And that they're not going to have a normal life the rest of their life. Why should someone give them someone that much credit? But you're going to say, it's been so long, it's been this, it's so hard to get out of bad habits. Right? I don't disagree. I'm not going to disagree with that. But I'm telling you from experience that the longer time goes, the more I live that mentality, the less angry you get. I'm not saying you don't get angry ever and it totally dissipates and it's gonzo. Not going to say that. But you know what? Things that bothered me a long time ago, not even an issue now. So let someone talk, let them talk. Doesn't mean I'm still not angry, which I shouldn't be. Got to get rid of this. But, it doesn't mean, I'm taking to heart anything they say at all. Okay, I'll listen, I'll answer this, that. That's it. That's as much as I'll do. Now, after the facts, calm down and move on to other things. But does it get me, so burning mad as it used to? No. Not even close. Right? But we have an obligation to make sure our lives are not destroyed by ourselves as well. Because who says I have to give in to that? Who says I have to let that person have that much control of my head? That's not easy. Right? Right? If it's somebody who you don't care about and they say something, it doesn't matter. If it's a parent, if it's a sibling, it hurts more. Right? But, I've come to the realization people say things, they don't have a clue what they're saying. And you know what? Why am I going to waste energy over it? You're not going to change them. They're not interested in listening. So you move on. You let them talk and that's it. You don't get into too philosophical discussions. You have to say what they say and finished. You're not going to get anything out of it anyway, right? But a person can say, you know what, I don't need this at all. Why have this connection? You're right. You can also do that. Probably better. But I'm saying over time, you keep going through the same thing in your head. They're nothing. They'll never be anything. They're schizophrenic, all these different things. They deserve to be in a straitjacket, locked up in Sing Sing. And they're absolutely insane. Yeah, they are absolutely insane. No question about it. They're 100% insane. That's it. The more a person does that, the less effect it has. Now, if a person worked on that long enough, it shouldn't have any effect on you at all. It should go away by itself. Eventually. Doesn't always work out that way, but I'm saying if we think that mentality, that part can be willed away. And then you understand, okay, maybe I have to go through these things because of different things, whatever. You put the whole package together over time, it could dissipate majorly. And even if it flares up here and there, it's not the same as it ever was. That's a major thing. Right? But again, that's not always going to work. Person may still have to go through therapy. Right? May have to be, it could have caused depression, some minor depression. Person may have to be on mood stabilizer because it's not enough to will it by itself. That's the point. Right? Maybe sometimes it could, depending. Right? But it doesn't always work out that way. Right? That's, and the older we get, the older we get, hopefully we get wiser. But if a person's been crippled by it for so long, it's hard. Right? It's very, very hard. And like I said, I can say from experience, it'll be a long time. A long time to just put things aside and to say, okay, this is what it is. This is how you're going to look at it. And that's what you're going to do. Now, would I say 100% of the time it's like that? I'm not going to say 100%. It's a heck of a lot better than it ever was. I don't think there's any question, but had to work very hard. And if we don't take anything that these people say seriously, sticks and stones were made of Teflon, you move on. But for other things in trauma, it doesn't necessarily go that way. Even with all that, I certainly think by sexual abuse is not going to help. It's not going to help 100%. I don't think it'll help 70%. I think that a person has to deal with really through therapy. Speak it out. Right? Torah can help. I'm not saying not. It's not going to, I don't think it's going to take a person over the hump 100% without any other therapy. I don't think it can happen. And, and that's not saying the Torah is not special and the Torah is not important and all that. There's just other things going on. As strong as a person may be, they cannot will certain things just through Torah. If they could, great. Right? But I don't think, I don't think we're as strong as maybe we think we are, or we still have insecurities. And if that's the case, all the Torah in the world, it's not going to get a person over that hump. It'll help a lot, but it may not get them over the hump. That is the, that I think is the truth. Someone here points out sometimes generational parents hit their kids because the parents hit them. Yeah, it's something that's in the genes. I don't think I don't think that's a I don't think that's a question. Yeah, someone asks, person does something else as a Noahide, and there is no lecture online. Not a problem. Even as a Jew, not a problem. Let's say a person washing the dishes and want to listen to a class while they're doing that. Not a problem. Right? Not an issue. 100% not an issue. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah, you never know where this class goes. That's for sure. Yeah, any other questions? Again, I'm not a therapist. Don't no one should think I'm a therapist. I didn't play one on TV either. Right? But I did spend a number of years learning by somebody that is a tremendous rabbinic scholar and a psychologist at the same time. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the world. I learned a lot about myself, right? In general. And, a person can come, from parents that can do all kinds of crazy things that still come out normal, potentially. It's going to take a lot of work. But a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with mentality. And if you have that Torah mentality, that'll help a lot. Will not necessarily bring you over the hump. I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but in theory, maybe it can happen, right? I don't think so. I mean, I've seen too much. I've heard too much, from big people that it's going to take other things. Just knowing all this is very good. I think maybe for something 60, 70%, if a person lives that mentality, continues to live that mentality, that's very good. Does that get themselves over the hump 100%? No, it doesn't. I don't think it does. Right? But you might not need to get over the hump 100%. If a person lives this mentality and they can understand, and they can function and they keep thinking the same thing over and over and over again, what's my fault? It was my soul, it was trials and this and that, right? Then, that can help tremendously. Tremendously. I just think maybe for certain trauma is not enough. For sure, if a person's bipolar, schizophrenic, that's not going to happen. Right? That you need that you need, you need to go to a psychiatrist, psychologist, you need medication, right? And that might be for life. Right? That's a different thing. Right? Certain mental illness, whatever. But I'm saying if a person even understands there are things that were beyond your control, a person has to look in the mirror and say, is that enough? Is what the Torah say, is that enough? That my soul had to go through that? It wasn't my fault. I didn't bring it on. I didn't choose this. Right now, I'll get in my psychotherapist mode here. A person doesn't choose that. Right? It's not their fault. They're not guilty. They're not guilty for that. Yeah, but people let it happen. People didn't, people said it's your own fault. People said other things, whatever it is. Right? There are other factors here. Right? But if a person keeps saying it's not my fault, I didn't, whatever, it doesn't mean it's not traumatic. The trauma is still there. But I'm saying this dissipates the trauma, brings it way down. I think it brings it way down. But again, someone who's gone through something like that, maybe they'll tell me it only helps 30%. It only helps 40%. Maybe I'm totally wrong. It's not going to help 70%. Maybe it's not that high percentage. I don't know. I would think, though, it helps the person think in a certain way that should clear up a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's really the point, is it doesn't mean it's going to get them necessarily over the hump. But I do think it helps a lot. And certainly psychological abuse, it can help a lot. By just looking at, a person like they're nuts. And that whatever they say doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. They look at it in that way, that helps a lot. Over time, that will help tremendously. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asks, a child is a whole thing here. About, let's say someone comes to Noahide or they want to convert, it's no guarantee the kids will go on the same path. None. And if they don't go on the same path, that's their choice. You can explain to them the path, to the best of your ability, etc. If they want, very good. If they don't want, that's their choice. And they have to be okay with the parent, because the kids don't necessarily go in the same direction the parents go, whether for conversion or being a Noahide. So what are they supposed to do? You can teach them what it means to be a Noahide. Teach them what it means to be a Jew if they want to go through conversion. All right? That's the best you can do. right? More than that, they have to do on their own. But yeah, you can try and educate them. I don't see why not. I definitely don't see why not. If she wants to be a Noahide, she should learn what it means. 100%, she should learn what it means. Put her in that direction if she's interested. Send her to videos, different things that you can do. If she's not interested, it's a different issue. That's what I would say. Is Noahide obligated to bring children into the world? Yes. They should have children, populate the world. Doesn't mean they have to have 10. Doesn't mean they have to have 5. They can have one every 5 years, every 10 years, but they should have kids. Right? It's an obligation to populate the world. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook. I'm back at Michael Chaim Coffman. Find me on Facebook there. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. Send me an email, rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RabbiChaimCoffman @gmail.com. Wish everyone a good beginning of the day, end of the day, or middle of the day.